They laughed at you, remember? They whispered your name like it was a joke, like you were just another background character in their story. But something changed. Something broke the script. Somewhere behind closed doors, where powerful people sit around tables, thinking they control everything, someone just flipped the board. Someone dismantled their plans piece by piece, exposed their weaknesses, shattered their confidence. And in the silence that followed, they said your name, not with laughter this time, not with disrespect, with fear. Because while they were busy underestimating you, you were becoming unpredictable. While they were playing checkers, you were learning how to burn the whole chessboard. See, the funny thing about power is, it doesn't always wear a crown. Sometimes it wears scars. Sometimes it wears silence. Sometimes it looks exactly like the person they thought would never matter. You. This isn't just a story about revenge. This is a story about psychological warfare, about patience, about the moment the ignored become unavoidable. And today, we talk about what happens when someone powerful destroys your enemies and makes sure they never forget who you are. They laughed because they thought they understood you. That was the first mistake. People always laugh at what they cannot measure, what they cannot predict, what they cannot put inside their neat little boxes of logic. To them you looked ordinary, maybe too quiet, maybe too different, maybe too focused, while everyone else was busy performing for attention. So they turned you into entertainment. Every smirk, every sarcastic comment, every little joke at your expense was their way of convincing themselves that you were harmless. Laughter is often just fear wearing makeup. They laughed when you stayed calm while they tried to provoke you. They laughed when you chose silence instead of arguments. They laughed when you walked away instead of reacting. To them it looked like weakness. To them it looked like you had nothing to say. But what they never understood is that dangerous people don't waste energy proving themselves to spectators. Dangerous people observe, they calculate, they remember. And while they were laughing, you were learning. You were learning who pretended to be your friend. You were learning who enjoyed seeing you doubted. You were learning who talked the most when they thought you weren't listening. Every fake smile became data. Every insult became motivation. Every betrayal became a lesson carved into your memory like a permanent reminder that trust should be expensive. They thought they were watching you fail, but you were actually watching them reveal themselves. There's something almost poetic about how people celebrate too early. They celebrate when they think they've figured you out. They celebrate when they think they've pushed you into a corner. They celebrate when they believe the story is already written. And that's when they get comfortable. That's when they get careless. That's when they stop paying attention. And that's when the silence begins. Because one day the jokes stopped landing. One day the same people who used to mock you started noticing something different. Your reactions changed. Your presence changed. Your energy became harder to read. You weren't trying to prove anything anymore. You weren't reacting the same way. You weren't giving them the emotional responses they were used to feeding on. That's when confusion started replacing laughter. They started asking quiet questions. Why is he so calm now? Why does he look so focused? Why does it feel like he knows something we don't? Why does it feel like he's 10 steps ahead in a game we didn't even realize we were playing? Because the truth is, nothing scares people more than someone they can no longer predict. The person they laughed at was available for their opinions. The person you became was not. The version of you they understood slowly disappeared, replaced by someone more disciplined, more controlled, more intentional. Someone who stopped explaining. Someone who stopped reacting. Someone who started moving with purpose instead of emotion. And the loudest people always become the quietest when they realize they misjudged someone. You could see it in their eyes before you heard it in their voices. That small hesitation when they spoke to you. That forced respect in their tone. That careful way they started choosing their words. The same mouths that once threw jokes carelessly now measured every sentence. Not because you demanded respect, but because your growth made disrespect feel dangerous. Respect born from admiration is common. Respect born from realization is unforgettable. Because they realized something too late. They realized that while they were busy trying to feel superior, you were busy becoming undeniable. While they were competing for attention, you were building substance. While they were laughing at your current chapter, you were writing a completely different ending. And nothing hits harder than realizing the person you underestimated is no longer someone you can compete with, control, or even fully understand anymore. Power moves are rarely loud. They don't need fanfare or applause to exist. True power doesn't announce itself with flashy displays or exaggerated gestures. Instead, it moves quietly, invisibly, in ways most people overlook until it's too late. It hides in preparation, in patience, in the small choices no one thinks matter. People expect power to be visible, to be something they can measure or control. They think power is shouting, dominating, forcing their will on others. But real power doesn't compete for attention. Real power waits. It watches. It learns. They were busy showing off, busy making a scene, busy letting everyone know how on control they were. They never noticed the quiet shifts, the small, calculated changes happening right under their noses. They never noticed the way things aligned for you, unnoticed by everyone else, like a storm quietly forming on the horizon. They never noticed how influence can be a whisper, not a scream, and how a single, subtle action can move mountains without anyone realizing it until the mountain has already fallen. Power moves are about timing, patience, and perception. It's about understanding when to act and, more importantly, when not to act. It's about setting the stage so that when the moment comes, the results seem inevitable, even to those who thought they were untouchable. People underestimate the quiet ones, the ones who sit back and let the world expose itself while they build a strategy in shadows. They underestimate the person who smiles while they think they're plotting your downfall, not realizing every move they make is feeding your advantage. The irony is that the louder someone tries to appear powerful, the easier it is to manipulate them. Loudness attracts attention. Loudness reveals weakness. Loudness shows that they are dependent on perception, not reality. Those who seek to control through visibility are always the first to fall because real power doesn't need validation. Real power doesn't beg for recognition. Real power bends situations to its will before anyone even realizes a game is being played. By the time they realize what happened, it's already too late. Your power move is completed. The shift has occurred. Decisions they made under the assumption that they were in control now look like mistakes. Opportunities they thought they owned have vanished. Influence that once seemed theirs slips away. And suddenly, everyone is scrambling to understand how someone so quiet, so unnoticed, so underestimated, managed to achieve what they could not see coming. Influence built in silence is stronger than influence shouted from rooftops. Actions that happen without spectacle leave no room for defense, no time for reaction. They are precise, unavoidable, and permanent. People may mock your quiet approach at first. They may even laugh when you choose strategy over confrontation. But every calculated step you take in the shadows builds momentum, and that momentum is what crashes into them when the time is right. Power isn't just about what you take. It's about what you control without anyone realizing. It's about guiding outcomes while remaining invisible, like a shadow in a room full of performers. It's about forcing people to act in ways that benefit you without them knowing they've been influenced. And the most terrifying part, they only realize it happened when it's too late to change anything, when the consequences are already unfolding, when the illusion of control they clung to is shattered. True power leaves a mark without leaving evidence. It's remembered, not celebrated. It's respected, not envied. And when someone finally notices, they feel that sinking realization that the person they underestimated, ignored, or mocked has been orchestrating a move far beyond their understanding. They try to reverse it, fight it, argue it, but the quiet, invisible work has already been done. They see results they cannot undo, actions they cannot stop, consequences they cannot escape. And the one who made the move, they remain calm, composed, almost bored, because the real game isn't in reaction. It's in control, in influence, in the silent, deliberate domination that no one could anticipate. Power moves are not about chaos, they are about inevitability. They are the art of making something happen that seems impossible until it has already occurred. And the funniest part is, while they scramble to figure out how it happened, you already know. They were never in control at all. Your name started showing up where it shouldn't have been. In boardrooms, in whispered conversations, in moments where decisions were made and power was being distributed, someone mentioned you. Not as a joke, not as a rumor, not as background noise. Your name carried weight now. People who once ignored you, who once dismissed you, who once laughed in your face, suddenly felt the sharp awareness of your presence, even in spaces you hadn't even entered physically. That's the strange, dangerous power of recognition. It doesn't always arrive on its own. Sometimes it arrives through someone else, someone powerful, someone who understands the leverage your name represents. And when it does, everything changes. At first, they didn't know what to make of it. Your name being spoken in the wrong circles, in the wrong tone, at the wrong time. It was like a puzzle piece appearing out of nowhere in a game they thought they owned. The same mouths that used to mock, you now hesitated mid-sentence. The same eyes that rolled when you walked into a room now tracked your movements with subtle tension. They didn't just notice, they felt it. The realization that you were a force to be considered, that you existed as more than a shadow, more than an idea, more than a name on a list. It unsettled them in ways laughter never could. Recognition can be terrifying. It's terrifying because it changes the rules without warning. It forces people to reconsider everything they thought they knew. It exposes their miscalculations. It highlights their assumptions. And when your name enters their conversations, it brings all of that exposure with it. Suddenly, they're vulnerable. Suddenly, they're forced to acknowledge that someone they underestimated has influence, has presence, has reach. That the story they thought they controlled is no longer theirs to tell. There's a subtle art to having your name spoken in powerful spaces. You don't demand it. You earn it without them realizing it. It's not about visibility or ego. It's about impact. Every choice, every move, every silent act of strategy accumulates until someone finally recognizes it and brings it into the open. And when that recognition comes from someone powerful, someone with authority, someone whose attention shifts the balance, it's not just validation. It's a signal. It's a message that you have arrived, that your existence can no longer be ignored, that your influence is no longer theoretical. It's real, tangible, unavoidable. The reactions are what make it fascinating. People shift uncomfortably when your name is spoken. They adjust their posture, their tone, their strategies. Conversations that once flowed easily become guarded. cautious, tense. They measure their words now because they understand that what they say, or fail to say, about you carries weight. Even allies begin to tread lightly. Even opponents begin to respect boundaries they never respected before. The simple act of your name being mentioned has real consequences, rippling through systems and hierarchies in ways they cannot undo. And it doesn't have to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes the most terrifying recognition is quiet, almost casual, almost invisible. A sentence dropped into a meeting, a casual remark during a discussion, a subtle acknowledgement from someone whose opinion matters more than all the laughter and mockery ever did. That moment carries with it an unspoken truth. You are not just present, you are significant. You are not just noticed, you are unavoidable. You are no longer background noise. You are the signal everyone has to tune into. Fear often accompanies recognition. People fear what they cannot control. They fear influence they cannot counter. They fear the person who has already changed the rules without even trying to announce it. And your name, spoken by the right person, becomes the embodiment of that fear. It reminds them of all the times they underestimated you, all the assumptions they made, all the laughter they wasted, and all the moments they ignored your presence. They realize too late that the person they thought was irrelevant is now a factor they cannot ignore. Being recognized is more than fame or attention. It's a kind of power that reshapes the environment around you. It forces recalculations, forces strategy shifts, forces respect. And the beauty of it is that it doesn't even require your intervention. The power of your name exists independently now. It moves through rooms, conversations, and decisions, leaving subtle but undeniable traces of influence. People feel it even when they cannot see it. They respond to it even when they cannot articulate why. And in that moment, you occupy a space they thought they controlled, a space they never expected you to reach. Once your name is out there, once it carries weight, once it is associated with influence, intelligence and unpredictability, everything changes. They are no longer laughing. They are calculating. They are cautious. They are aware. And you remain calm, knowing the most powerful move isn't shouting your presence. It's letting the right people do it for you, while the world silently recalibrates around your significance. Respect hits differently when it's born from fear. There's a weight to it that admiration or popularity can never match, because fear is primal, immediate, undeniable. It's not about being liked. It's not about being celebrated or praised. It's about presence, an energy that shifts the room, a perception that bends decisions, a reality that makes people pause and reconsider before they act. When someone finally understands that you are not to be underestimated, that your actions carry consequences they cannot control, that's when respect transforms into something deeper, something heavier, something that lingers in the silence between words. People often confuse fear with hate and admiration with respect, but real respect isn't given lightly. It isn't something that can be demanded with titles, status, or empty gestures. Real respect comes when someone realizes that underestimating you is dangerous, that your potential is unpredictable, that your influence is unavoidable. It's the kind of respect that doesn't need explanation, because the consequences of crossing you speak louder than any argument ever could. It's felt before it's acknowledged, sensed before it's spoken, and internalized before it can be resisted. When they start treating you differently, you can see it in their eyes, their posture, the pause in their voice. The same people who once mocked your choices, doubted your decisions, or ignored your presence now measure every word they say. They weigh every action. They hesitate before making assumptions. They calculate outcomes carefully because they've realized, sometimes too late, that underestimating you is a mistake they cannot afford to repeat. The fear-generated respect doesn't just appear in interactions, it infiltrates systems. Decisions shift subtly to avoid your influence. Alliances form cautiously around your existence. Strategies are recalibrated with you in mind. People adjust their behavior not because they want to, but because ignoring you now carries an unseen risk. You've moved beyond simple recognition. You are now a variable in their calculations, a factor that must be accounted for at every step, a presence that silently enforces boundaries they once ignored. There's a beauty in it, a dark satisfaction, knowing that your influence is not just acknowledged, it's anticipated. They respect you not because they like you, not because they admire you, but because they fear what happens if they don't. Fear sharpens attention, heightens awareness, and demands action. And when people act out of that fear, it validates every choice you've made, every path you've taken, every moment you've quietly prepared, while they were blind to your eyes. Respect that emerges from fear also forces honesty. People can no longer pretend to misread you or underestimate your intentions. Their strategies, their conversations, their choices are now tempered with awareness of your capabilities. Lies become harder to maintain, manipulation becomes riskier, and arrogance becomes dangerous. They see that power is not in the noise they make, but in the calm, deliberate, and inevitable way you operate. The same room that once ignored your presence now bends subtly to accommodate the reality of your influence. Fear has a subtle way of teaching lessons that admiration cannot. It forces people to reconcile their assumptions with reality. It forces them to accept that someone they thought was controllable, predictable, or irrelevant is in fact a force of consequence. And unlike admiration, which can be faked or superficial, fear-generated respect is instinctive, immediate, unavoidable. It cuts through pretense, stripping away the illusions they relied on, revealing their vulnerability, and acknowledging your dominance. You notice the small shifts before they even speak. A hesitant tone in conversation. A slight change in posture when you enter a room. The careful choice of words when they discuss you with others. Every detail signals an unconscious acknowledgement. They understand you now. And that understanding is tinged with the sharp edge of caution. They know that underestimating you isn't just foolish. It's dangerous. Respect born from fear creates power dynamics that are permanent, subtle, and inescapable. It shapes interactions, guides decisions, and forces people to account for your influence in ways they didn't anticipate. Unlike admiration, which can fade or fluctuate, this kind of respect is resilient because it is grounded in self-preservation, in instinctual recognition, in the undeniable truth that crossing you has consequences. And in that silence, in those subtle pauses, in those recalculated choices, you feel it. The acknowledgement that your presence matters, that your actions resonate, that your potential cannot be ignored. Fear transforms perception into respect, hesitation into strategy, and underestimation into caution. And once they recognize it, once they understand it, everything changes. The way they speak, the way they act, the way they perceive the world around you. The loudest actions don't create this kind of respect. The dramatic gestures don't. The flashy displays don't. Only the quiet, undeniable, inevitable force of presence. The kind that can't be faked, manipulated, or controlled, commands it. And when it comes, it is absolute. It is pervasive. It is unforgettable. The same people who once dismissed you now treat you with a calculation, a vigilance, a wariness that confirms the power they refused to see until it was already undeniable. They planned your failure down to the smallest detail, thinking they had mapped out every possible outcome, every possible move, every possible weakness. They thought they understood you completely, that they had anticipated your reactions. calculated your limits, and positioned themselves perfectly to exploit them. They thought victory was guaranteed because they had the resources, the connections, and the influence. They didn't realize that while they were busy constructing their illusion of control, you were building something far more resilient, something unpredictable, something unstoppable. They underestimated patience. They underestimated strategy. They underestimated the quiet, relentless focus that turns apparent weakness into unbreakable strength. While they were confident in their power, you were learning, observing, adapting, and silently preparing. Every misstep they made, every oversight, every moment of arrogance fed into your advantage. Every time they assumed you were powerless, you were gaining momentum, like a storm quietly assembling its force before striking. Opportunity is born in spaces people think are safe. Their overconfidence created those spaces for you. Their assumptions about your limitations blinded them to the reality of your capability. Every underestimation, every dismissal, every mocking remark was a piece of the puzzle you were completing. They thought they were the architects of your story, but in truth, they were providing the materials for your rise. You didn't have to rush. You didn't have to confront them openly. You didn't need to explain yourself. Real power moves don't announce themselves. They unfold, deliberate, and inevitable. You let their plans unfold while you remained calm, focused, and undistracted. Their attacks, meant to destabilize you, only revealed their weaknesses. Their plots, designed to undermine you, only highlighted how predictable they had become. And through it all, you stayed one step ahead, quietly reshaping the game from the shadows. The beauty of strategy is that it turns the predictable into the unstoppable. What they thought was their advantage, resources, alliances, influence, became irrelevant when measured against foresight, patience, and cunning. They assumed their control was absolute, but real control lies in unpredictability, in mastering circumstances they cannot fully perceive. Every calculated choice you made became a ripple, every quiet action a lever shifting outcomes in your favor. By the time they realized it, the board was no longer theirs. Decisions they thought were theirs to dictate had already been influenced. Opportunities they thought they owned were already out of reach. Their confidence crumbled as they understood the depth of what they had failed to anticipate. What they believed would destroy you instead became the mechanism of their undoing. They had created the conditions for your rise without even knowing it. It is the paradox of power. Those who try to control others often end up being controlled by circumstances they failed to predict, while those who observe, adapt, and calculate silently shape outcomes that seem impossible until they happen. Your actions were never reactive. They were deliberate. Your patience was never passive. It was tactical. Your rise was not a fluke. It was the inevitable result of playing a long game in a world obsessed with short-term wins. This isn't about revenge in the way they imagined. It's about inevitability. It's about being the quiet force that shifts everything without warning. It's about allowing people to think they are in control until the moment reality proves otherwise. And when that moment comes, it isn't just victory. It's recognition. Recognition that they misjudged you, that they underestimated you, that every plan they made to suppress or destroy you was not just ineffective, but counterproductive. The lessons are in the silence before the storm. The victories are in the spaces they ignored. The power is in the unpredictability that leaves them scrambling while you remain composed, measured, unshaken. Every move they made against you only became another step in your ascent. Every attempt to corner you only revealed their own limitations. And the most satisfying part, they only realize it after it's already done, after the outcome is irreversible, after their confidence has been shattered. Your rise is proof that true strategy doesn't rely on their approval or their ignorance. True strategy uses their own arrogance against them. True power doesn't need to announce itself. It becomes unavoidable. While they were planning your failure, someone else was planning your inevitability. And that inevitability is now unfolding, unstoppable, undeniable, and irreversible. By the time they understand what happened, the game has already changed, the balance has shifted, and the consequences of their misjudgment are permanent. You didn't just survive their plans. You transformed them into the vehicle of your success. They may have thought they were testing you, controlling you, or destroying you. But in reality, every effort they made only solidified your power, sharpened your focus, and confirmed that you are a force they can no longer manipulate, underestimate, or ignore.